The gift of contempt, the Galactic Council had ruled the stars for over 12,000 years. Their empire stretched across hundreds of solar systems, connecting thousands of worlds through trade routes that pulsed with life and commerce. To them, the galaxy was ordered, predictable, and firmly under their control. Every species knew its place in the grand hierarchy. The Vaxxler dominated military affairs with their towering warriors and impenetrable battlecruisers. The Then controlled economics, their merchant fleets carrying goods between distant worlds. The Korath provided scientific advancement, their laboratories producing technologies that seemed like magic to lesser races. And then there was humanity, the newcomers who had barely learned to leave their own solar system. When humans first appeared at the Council's doorstep, requesting recognition as a spacefaring civilization, the chamber erupted in laughter. Ambassador Krell, a Vaxxler commander whose scales shimmered with medals from 100 conquests, stood before the human delegation with barely concealed amusement. The humans had arrived in a single vessel, a clumsy construction of metal and desperation that leaked radiation and struggled to maintain orbit. Their representative, a woman named Captain Sarah Chun, stood with dignity despite the mockery surrounding her. She wore a simple uniform, clean but clearly patched in several places. Her crew of 5 stood behind her, their faces betraying no emotion, even as alien dignitaries whispered insults loud enough to be heard. Krell approached the human captain with slow, deliberate steps that echoed through the massive council hall. His voice boomed across the chamber, amplified by technology that made every word feel like thunder. He informed humanity that they were too primitive to join the council, too weak to matter in galactic affairs, too insignificant to warrant serious consideration. The other council members nodded in agreement, their various alien features twisted into expressions of superiority. But Krell was not finished with his humiliation. He announced that the council would provide humanity with a gift, a demonstration of how vast the gap truly was between Earth and the civilized galaxy. Within weeks, massive cargo haulers appeared in Earth's orbit. They came without warning, their hulls scarred and ancient, their engines coughing toxic exhaust into the void. The ships opened their cargo bays and began dumping their loads into the space around humanity's homeworld. Thousands of tons of wreckage tumbled through the darkness. Broken hull sections from battles fought centuries ago. Shattered weapon systems that no longer functioned. Burned out engine cores that had been deemed too damaged to salvage. Twisted metal frameworks from ships whose names had been forgotten by history. The aliens called it their gift to humanity, their charity to a species that would never build anything worthy on its own. The broadcasts from alien news networks showed the dumping in vivid detail. Commentators laughed as they described the mountains of scrap accumulating around Earth. Some suggested that humans might be able to fashion crude shelters from the debris. Others joked that perhaps humanity could sell the metal for scrap value if they learned to smelt it properly. The message was clear and cruel. This garbage represented more technology than humanity could ever hope to create. The aliens wanted humans to understand their place at the bottom of galactic society. They wanted Earth to look up at the floating graveyard and feel the weight of their own inadequacy. But humanity's response surprised the galaxy. There were no angry transmissions demanding respect. No military threats or diplomatic protests. Earth's governments issued brief statements acknowledging the delivery and thanking the Council for their attention. Then silence fell over the human homeworld. The aliens interpreted this quiet as defeat, as acceptance of their inferior status. They believed humanity had finally understood the futility of challenging the established order. The Council moved on to other matters, already forgetting about the primitive species orbiting a small yellow star in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. What? The aliens did not see where the meetings happening. In secured facilities deep beneath Earth's surface. Military leaders, scientists, engineers, and industrial manufacturers gathered in rooms shielded from any possible surveillance. They studied holographic projections of the scrap field, analyzing every piece of debris floating in orbit. A man named Director Marcus Webb stood at the head of these meetings, his gray hair and weathered face telling the story of decades spent preparing for this moment. He had spent 30 years studying every scrap of alien technology that had ever fallen into human hands. Crashed probes, abandoned satellites, even fragments of alien ships that had accidentally drifted into human space. Webb and his team had reverse engineered what they could, cataloged what they could not, and waited for an opportunity. The scrap field was not an insult to Webb. It was an arsenal. Every broken hull contained metallurgical secrets that human scientists had only theorized about. Every shattered weapon system held components built with manufacturing techniques humanity had not yet mastered. Every burned-out engine core contained materials that could teach human engineers new principles of physics. The aliens had not given humanity garbage. They had provided a university, a laboratory, and a blueprint all at once. Webb understood that the Council's arrogance had blinded them to a simple truth. Humans were excellent scavengers, not because they were weak, but because they were adaptable. Throughout their history, humans had taken what others discarded and transformed it into something new and dangerous. The project began in absolute secrecy. Cargo shuttles launched from hidden facilities on Earth's dark side, traveling to the scrap field under the cover of commercial mining operations. They claimed to be harvesting the metal for construction materials, a story that made the aliens laugh even harder. Let the humans have their scrap metal. Let them build their pathetic little stations. The galaxy watched with amused indifference as human vessels maneuvered through the debris field, attaching cables and towing sections away. What no one realized was that these sections were being taken to a location far beyond Earth, to a region of space where human survey ships had discovered a massive asteroid cluster years earlier. Deep within this cluster, hidden behind layers of rock and ice, humanity built a shipyard unlike anything they had ever attempted. The facility existed in complete radio silence, communicating only through hardline connections and encrypted laser transmissions. Thousands of workers lived in rotating shifts, their families told they were on classified government projects that could not be discussed. The workers themselves knew only pieces of the larger plan. Welding teams connected hull sections without knowing the final design. Electronics specialists installed systems without understanding their purpose. Only a handful of people, including Director Webb and Chief Engineer Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres, understood what was truly being built in the darkness. Torres was a woman who had spent her entire career studying alien propulsion systems. She had written classified papers arguing that human technology could be hybridized with alien designs, creating systems that combined the best elements of both. The Council's gift gave her the chance to prove her theories. She stood in the shipyard's central command hub, watching through reinforced windows as the skeleton of something enormous began to take shape. The framework was built from Vaxler battlecruiser hulls, their structural integrity unmatched by anything humans had designed. The power systems came from thin cargo haulers, massive reactors that could generate energy for decades without refueling. The weapons were Korath plasma cannons, unstable and unpredictable in their original form, but fascinating in their potential. The work was brutal and dangerous. Alien systems were not designed to interface with human technology. The power requirements were different. The control mechanisms operated on principles that human computers struggled to interpret. Explosions killed workers when systems overloaded. Radiation leaks forced entire sections to be abandoned and rebuilt. But humanity pressed forward with grim determination. Every failure taught them something new. Every setback revealed a solution they had not considered. Slowly, painfully, the ship began to emerge from the chaos of mismatched parts and incompatible systems. Months passed, and the galaxy continued to ignore humanity. Alien merchants sometimes passed through human space, noting with amusement that the scrap field around Earth had diminished considerably. They assumed humans were simply clearing away the debris, perhaps embarrassed by the constant reminder of their inadequacy. Some alien scouts reported unusual activity near the asteroid cluster beyond Earth's outer planets, but their reports were dismissed as unimportant. Humans were building mining stations, nothing more. The Council had more pressing concerns: border disputes between member species, trade negotiations that affected entire sectors, military buildups in contested regions. Earth and its primitive inhabitants barely registered as a footnote in galactic politics. But in the hidden shipyard, something was awakening. The ship's central reactor came online for the first time, flooding the vessel with power that made the entire structure hum with energy. Torres stood in the engine room, watching as displays lit up across the walls. The hybrid systems were working. Human computers interfaced with alien power cores. Thin reactors fed energy through Vaxelar conduits. Korath weapons charged with a whine that grew steadily louder. The ship was not just functional. It was exceeding every projection, every hope, every desperate calculation. Director Webb received the report while standing on Earth's surface, looking up at the night sky. Somewhere beyond his vision, hidden in the darkness between worlds, humanity's answer to the galaxy's contempt was ready for its first test flight. He activated his encrypted communicator and gave a single order: light her up. Let them see what we built from their garbage. In the asteroid cluster, the ship's engines ignited with a brilliant blue flame that could be seen across the solar system. Alien sensors throughout human space suddenly screamed warnings. Energy readings spiked to levels that should have been impossible for human technology. Something massive was moving in the darkness, something that radiated power signatures matching a dozen different alien civilizations. The galaxy's attention finally, inevitably, turned back toward Earth. And this time, no one was laughing. Asterisk, when silence speaks louder than war. The alien detection networks lit up like a supernova across the galaxy. Every monitoring station, every border outpost, every military vessel within 3 sectors received the same alarming data. An unknown energy signature had appeared in human space, massive beyond comprehension, radiating power levels that matched capital warships from multiple civilizations simultaneously. The readings made no sense. Humans did not possess this kind of technology. They could barely maintain atmospheric flight, let alone construct something capable of generating energy outputs that rivaled Vaxelar dreadnoughts. Yet the sensors did not lie, and the signature was undeniably coming from the region beyond Earth's outer planets. Ambassador Krell stood in the Galactic Council's emergency session chamber, his scales now pale with concern rather than gleaming with confidence. Around him, representatives from dozens of species argued in panicked voices that echoed off the crystalline walls. The Fen economic minister demanded explanations for how humans had acquired power generation technology that appeared superior to their own carefully guarded reactor designs. The Korath science director insisted the readings must be sensor malfunctions because the energy patterns suggested weapon systems that their species had spent millennia perfecting. But the Vaxelar military intelligence officer, a battle-scarred veteran named Commander Thrace, silenced them all with a single declaration. The humans had reverse-engineered everything they had been given and built something entirely new. Krell refused to accept this assessment. He insisted that humans lacked the intellectual capacity for such achievements. They were scavengers, nothing more. Perhaps they had accidentally triggered some ancient alien device hidden in the scrap. Perhaps a dormant AI had awakened and commandeered their primitive facilities. The Council needed to send a fleet immediately to investigate and neutralize whatever threat had emerged. But Thrace disagreed with cold military logic. If humans had actually built a warship from the discarded technology of multiple civilizations, sending a fleet might be interpreted as an act of war. And if this mysterious vessel was indeed operational and combat capable, the Council could not predict its capabilities or limitations. They would be fighting an unknown enemy with unknown weapons built from their own technology. The debate raged for hours while across the galaxy. Millions of civilians watched news broadcasts showing computer simulations of what might be lurking in human space. Fear spread through populations that had never known genuine military threat. The Galactic Council had maintained peace through overwhelming force for thousands of years. Member species felt safe, knowing that no single civilization could challenge the combined might of the Alliance. But humans were not members. They existed outside the protection and restrictions of Council law. If they had weaponized the scrap field, they had violated no treaties because they had never been permitted to sign treaties in the first place. The legal framework that governed galactic civilization simply did not account for this situation. Finally, Krell made his decision. The Council would dispatch an expeditionary force to human space, not to attack, but to investigate and make contact. They would approach with diplomatic credentials and request permission to inspect this mysterious vessel. If humans refused, the fleet would maintain a defensive perimeter and await further instructions. It was a compromise that satisfied no one, but prevented immediate escalation. Commander Thrace was given command of the expedition, leading a battle group that included 3 heavy cruisers, 12 destroyers, and enough firepower to sterilize a small moon. The message was clear. The Council came in peace, but would tolerate no threats to galactic stability. The fleet arrived in human space 3 days later, their vessels dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. Thrace expected to find a hastily constructed station, or perhaps a cobbled-together warship merely holding its components together. Instead, his sensors showed him something that made his blood run cold despite years of combat experience. The vessel was enormous, easily twice the length of his flagship and far more massive in terms of total displacement. It hung in the void, surrounded by the asteroid cluster, its hull a patchwork of different materials that somehow formed a cohesive whole. Vaxillar armor plating covered critical sections. Thin reactor signatures pulsed from its core. Koreth weapon emplacements bristled along its flanks. But the design, the architecture, the way everything fit together, that was purely human innovation. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of what humanity had named the Reclaimer, watching the alien fleet approach on her tactical displays. She wore the same patched uniform she had worn to the council chambers, a deliberate choice that reminded her crew where they had started. Director Webb stood beside her, his weathered face showing no emotion as he studied the incoming vessels. Chief Engineer Torres monitored her systems from the engine room, ready to push the hybrid reactors to full power if combat became necessary. But Chun hoped it would not come to that. Humanity had not built the ship to conquer the galaxy. They had built it to demand respect. The communication request came through standard diplomatic channels. Commander Thrace appeared on the main view screen, his reptilian features carefully neutral. He began with formal greetings and requests to discuss the nature of the human vessel. Chun let him speak for several minutes before interrupting with calm authority. She informed the commander that the Reclaimer was a human warship, constructed entirely from materials the Galactic Council had gifted to Earth. Every component, every system, every weapon had been salvaged from the scrap field the aliens had so generously provided. Humanity had simply done what humans did best. They had taken what others discarded and made it into something new. Thrace's expression flickered between surprise and grudging respect. He asked permission to bring his technical specialists aboard to verify these claims. Chun denied the request with polite firmness. The Reclaimer's internal systems were classified human military technology. However, she offered an alternative demonstration. If the commander would move his fleet to a safe distance, humanity would show exactly what their scrap ship could accomplish. Thrace hesitated, consulting with his officers and with the council representatives watching from distant chambers. Finally, he agreed. His fleet withdrew to maximum sensor range, while Chun gave the order her crew had been waiting months to hear. Torres pushed the reactors to 60% power, far below their maximum capacity, but more than sufficient for the demonstration. The reclaimer's engines blazed with light that outshone nearby stars. The ship accelerated from standstill to combat speed in seconds, performing maneuvers that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size. It pivoted on its axis with the grace of a fighter craft, its hybrid propulsion systems combining thin efficiency with human-vectored thrust technology. Then the weapons came online. Korath plasma cannons fired controlled bursts at asteroids several thousand kilometers away, vaporizing targets with precision that the original weapons had never possessed. Human targeting computers had eliminated the instability that plagued Korath designs, creating weapon systems that were both more powerful and more accurate than anything the aliens had built. But the true revelation came when Torres activated the ship's defensive grid. Human engineers had studied the way different alien civilizations approached shielding technology. The Vaxler used brute force energy barriers. The Fen employed sophisticated deflection fields. The Korath favored adaptive plasma screens. Humanity had combined all three approaches into a layered defense system that shifted and adapted in real time. Torres demonstrated this by flying the reclaimer through a debris field at high speed, the shields automatically adjusting to deflect, absorb, or disintegrate incoming objects based on their composition and velocity. It was technology that no single alien species possessed, made possible only by humanity's willingness to think beyond traditional boundaries. Thrace watched the display with the eyes of a military professional who understood exactly what he was seeing. This was not a lucky accident or a desperate gamble. This was mastery of principles that had taken his own civilization thousands of years to develop, achieved by humans in less than a year. He opened a channel to the council, his voice steady, but carrying undertones of concern that his superiors would recognize. Humanity had not just built a warship. They had created a hybrid vessel that incorporated the best aspects of multiple technological traditions while eliminating their weaknesses. If humans could do this with scrap metal and salvaged components, what could they accomplish with proper resources and time? The Galactic Council convened an emergency session once again, but this time the tone was dramatically different. There was no laughter, no mockery, no casual dismissal of human capabilities. Ambassador Krell sat in silence, his earlier confidence shattered by the reality of what humanity had achieved. The economic minister calculated the implications of human engineering reaching galactic markets. The science director worried about humans reverse engineering even more advanced technologies. The military commanders feared what would happen if Earth decided to build a fleet of these hybrid warships. One vessel was a curiosity. 100 would shift the balance of power in entire sectors. Captain Chan received a formal communication from the council within hours. They requested a diplomatic meeting, not at council headquarters where humanity would come as supplicants, but in neutral space where both parties could meet as equals. The tone was respectful, almost cautious. They proposed establishing formal relations, discussing technology sharing agreements, and exploring the possibility of human membership in the Galactic Council. Chan smiled as she read the message. Membership had been humanity's goal from the beginning, but now they would enter the Council not as primitives, begging for acceptance, but as a civilization that had proven its worth. Webb stood beside Chun as they composed their response. He suggested they accept the meeting, but make clear that humanity had conditions. Earth would share some of its hybrid technology, but only in exchange for unrestricted access to Council's scientific databases. Humanity would consider membership, but only if granted full voting rights and representation equal to founding species. The days of being treated as inferior were over. Humanity had taken the galaxy's garbage and forged it into a ship that commanded respect. Now they would take their place among the stars, not through conquest or submission, but through the same stubborn determination that had always defined their species. The Reclaimer remained in orbit as negotiations began, a silent monument to what humanity could accomplish when pushed to the edge. Workers throughout the hidden shipyard began construction on 3 more vessels, each incorporating lessons learned from the first. The galaxy watched with mixed emotions as Earth transformed from an ignored backwater into a rising power that could no longer be dismissed. Some species viewed this development with hope, seeing humans as potential allies who thought differently than traditional civilizations. Others watched with fear, wondering what humanity might build next. Commander Thrace submitted his final report to the Galactic Council with a single recommendation: never underestimate humanity again. They were survivors, innovators, and most dangerously, they were learners who could take any technology and improve upon it. The Council had tried to humiliate Earth by giving them garbage, but in doing so, they had accidentally provided the tools humanity needed to announce their arrival on the galactic stage. It was a mistake that would reshape interstellar politics for generations to come. On Earth, people looked up at the stars with new understanding. The floating graveyard that had orbited their world was gone, transformed into humanity's first true warship. Children would grow up hearing stories of the Reclaimer, the ship built from insults and determination. And somewhere in the darkness of space, Captain Sarah Chan sat in her command chair and smiled, knowing that humanity had finally earned what they had always deserved. Not pity, not charity, not tolerance, but genuine respect. The galaxy had mocked their scrap, but now humanity commanded the deadliest ship in the stars, and the future belonged to those brave enough to build it. Asterisk.